Today we're going to be finding out just how many engine moves it takes my 1600 rated viewer to beat me in a game of chess. For those of you who don't know what this difference in rating means, a 1600, which is the rating of my opponent, versus a 2400, which is my own chess.com rating, would give an 800 point rating gap. And every 400 points, the opponent is 10 times more likely to win against you, which means that with an 800 point gap, that would put my subscribers' odds of beating me at 100 to 1 without any engine assistance. So I'm going to start off with a balanced game as a control variable where my opponent is going to play without any engine assistance. We're going to see how this game goes. And then from there, I'm going to allow them to use 5 engine moves of their choice throughout the game. And we're going to continue building up. So we're going to give them 10 on that game if they don't beat me, and then 20 on the next. I have a feeling that the tipping point is going to be around 10 engine moves. We're going to have to wait and see. That'll be very interesting. And as well as that, I'm going to try and guess, and you guys can play along to see if you can find out which moves my opponent used engine assistance on. But okay, this game is just a regular rapid game. Definitely not any engine assistance here. C4 is not the greatest move because now my knight can jump into the b4 square, and this knight also has access to d4. Potentially c2 can come under a lot of pressure. But either way, knight is going to go back to c6, hits the pawn, hits the d4 square. Other knight can come and support it, so this should be a fairly good position for black. We're going to get to see how my viewer plays without any engine help to start, and then we're going to see what kind of difference it makes, which I think is quite an interesting analysis because I find in online chess you've got like very obvious cheaters, and then you've got slightly more skilled cheaters who might hide their cheating a bit more effectively as they don't cheat on every move. So this is probably a more accurate example of the kind of feel that you're going to get when someone is cheating against you. So we get d4 attacking in the center. I should be able to just take that, and the e5 pawn is pretty loose afterwards. If the knight takes, I can take with the queen here. Knight's going to have to drop back to e2. Looks fairly unpleasant. So let's see how this is going to go. Could have also exchanged the knights, brought my other knight out, and then captured the pawn. Maybe that was even slightly better. But I'm pretty comfortable with this position. Let's trade once, maybe bring out my other knight, and I can develop after their queen were to capture, and should have a pretty nice position, pretty stable. Up a pawn, not too much to worry about. Okay, so they exchange on d4. Bishop to e2, they're looking to castle the king, very reasonable. I like the look of g6, bishop g7, want to get on this long diagonal so I can try and put some pressure on the rook in the corner. Defending the knight that they just attacked. f4, that's bad. Or is it? Wait a minute, I have a tactic. Okay, I got lucky there, guys. I got lucky there. That was poor. That was poor. So do I play knight to f3 or do I play knight to d3? I think I'm going to play knight to d3 because bishop to d4 wins back the bishop, and my bishop opens up on the diagonal. Very sketchy situation there. I don't know. You know what they say, the tactics work out when you're playing good moves, but definitely got away with that one. Okay, d6. You can always get the bishop out. Bishop can go to e6, going to castle short. Okay, let's castle. They just develop the knights. They still have no castles kingside, which is a little bit awkward. We can always drop the bishop back here. And I want to go bishop to e6, rook c8, and build up pressure on this guy. b5 will also be a move. Pawn to b5. I can capture that. So let's play b5. It's the most aggressive move. Trying to get that pawn break, open some files for my rooks. f5 would be very aggressive. f5 is interesting, but f5 takes, I take, and then you take, and then I will take with my rook, and it should be looking pretty good. If you decide to move the bishop somewhere, like the bishop here, I have d5, and the bishop is repelled away. Once again, if you exchange on d5, my bishop would take and get out of trouble. So we can take back with the rook. Okay, we can now win this pawn here. Knight's hit. If knight goes to g5, very tempting move. There's bishop h6 going for the pin. Okay, bishop h6. h4 has to be played. All right. Now rook can go to g4, start targeting these guys as well. I could also play like captures and rook f3. That looks pretty tempting. Maybe rook f3 right away. Let's get a little bit flashy with it. Rook f3, try and bring my other rook in down on this file. I quite like this d3 pawn here. It's actually a big nuisance. There's no rook h3, which could have been possible before. So I am a big fan of this. That's a skewer that has just been blundered, unfortunately. I probably should have just taken the knight first. Maybe a little bit inaccurate there. A little bit inaccurate, but oh well. Because now there's going to be knight e6. Okay, let's take the c file. I expect something like g5 from this guy. Alright, g5, as expected, drops the bishop back. A3 pawn is loose, could have taken it at any moment, doesn't really matter. Okay, take the pawn with check. h5 doesn't really do a whole lot. And let's go for this check, force the king up further. Okay, now I want to try and checkmate, ideally. Let's take this pawn. Okay, can I have a check here, check, back? Then maybe there's something there. At least I improved the positioning of my rook. Oh no, actually, the king can run this. King can run to d7. So I'm just going to take back. Let's stop overcomplicating. King is actually very sneaky. It's just running in the back. Okay. Let's go here. And it's very, very hard actually to checkmate this guy. Very, very hard. I quite like the look of rook to e3, pretty sneaky move. Attacking the knight so that I can try and deflect the king away from the defense. This knight is such a thorn. I just want it to go, really. Okay, yeah, so we can now give this check. King goes here. I could just grab the knight. Let's just simplify off the board. I'm just going to lose my rook, win back this pawn. And okay, so they don't go for that. Maybe trying for some stalemate trick or something. Let's go defend here. And if they want to try and check me away, I have rook f5. And we're going to try and march this pawn. Okay, gives a check. That is a resignation on the board for game number 1. Well played to my opponent for the first one. This is sort of to be expected with such a rating gap, but it'll be very interesting after having gotten our control variable to see what the next games will be when some engine moves get introduced. So now we're going to introduce 5 engine moves into the game. We're going to try and guess which ones they used it on, and I'm starting with pawn to e4 here. We're getting pawn to e5. I'm going to go for bishop to c4 with the bishop's opening targeting the f7 pawn. I doubt any engine assistance has been used at this very moment, and probably expect a move like knight to f6 to get played. So knight to f6 played, hitting the e4 pawn. I'm going to respond with knight to c3, defending it. Knight takes on e5 would allow queen to h5 with some big complications in the Frankenstein-Dracula gambit. So I would expect something, okay, c6. c6, I don't know if this is an engine move, because this is one of the top ways that players like to respond to this system, because you don't allow f4, forcing white to have to play knight to f3 to counter attack in the center, and then white now plays for d4, queen takes, and stuff like e5. So pawn to d5. I don't think d5 is that good. I'm going to, I think bishop to b3 I think is the move, maybe. Or maybe it's captures once and then bishop to b3, because bishop to b3 there's d4. But even bishop to b3, d4, knight e2, knight takes here, there's knight takes e5. So I'm not exactly sure. And trading here seems to allow the knight to develop to c6. So I'm going to play bishop to b3, because the e5 pawn is still loose, and if you're allowed to play d3, white gets a very stable position. Okay, bishop goes to b5. h4. This is an interesting one, for sure. I think this might be an engine move, or it's just very weird. The idea is that d3, there's now d4, which I guess makes sense. But it doesn't address any of the tension in the middle of the board, so it just seems like quite an interesting move. If it's the best move, definitely an engine move. But it could also just be, you know, some 1600 business. Although, isn't there just takes and then a capture here? But maybe that gets a little bit complicated with stuff like queen e2. I don't know. Definitely some weird stuff going on. I'm tempted by castles as well, actually. Castles looks quite nice because this pawn, once again, is still loose. If they want to trade this way, then be my guest. I have c4 and I can crack you open. And if you take this way, then I can just take in the center. I'm going to castle. Bishop to g4 is sort of an expected move. I don't think anything was used here. This makes a lot of sense. Do I now capture once, put a rook in the middle? If e4, then d3. Ooh, I don't know. Things are getting a little bit crazy here. So probably we want to capture here and then put a rook in the center, and if e4, then d3, and I will take here. e4 right away doesn't work because I can just sack the knight, and after takes rook e1, I'm going to collect the knight back. Wait, maybe it does work actually, because I was just looking back at it now. e4, knight takes, e4, knight takes, rook goes to e1. There's taking here, and I don't have d3 because the rook is loose. So that doesn't happen. So maybe you got a bit lucky there. I'm not really sure. But I think I want to play h3, g4, ideally. And if I can kick the bishop back to g6, capture the pawn, and hit the bishop, then I should be doing well. Okay, so g4. It's a high-risk move. Definitely not the kind of move you probably want to play against an engine, but I sort of have to because I need to justify the weakness of black's center pawns. So, okay, so we're going to capture on e5. And if I can get in some d4, maybe even f4, f5 could be pretty good here. But definitely getting interesting. Also g5. g5, a knight takes in the center, hitting the bishop. Getting crazy with it. Okay, knight to c6, trying to contend in the center. I think d4 makes the most sense here. Trying to take some space. Defending the knight, opening up the bishop. And g5 I don't think has as much venom anymore. So they capture here. Okay. Have the doubled pawns. If you allow bishop a3, then you're in huge trouble. So you have to castle. You have to castle. Absolutely. Okay, so castles. And now I like the look of f4 and trying to really steamroll this pawn down the board. The f4 could be met with bishop to e4, and there's no more pawn to f3, which is an interesting one. So maybe pawn to f3 and h4, h5 could in fact be the way to go. I also like the look of just bishop g4, just developing the bishop with a nice little pin. Let's develop the bishop, put some pressure on this knight here. Queen goes to d6. And there is some funny business with h4, h5 now, I think. This bishop is in a little bit of peril. I'm going to go for it, because if h4, h6, bishop takes, queen takes h5, bishop e4, there's f3, and the bishop is stuck. So I think that's enough for me. Although h4, knight takes here, takes. Queen takes h5, bishop e4, f3. The bishop still gets trapped. Very complicated stuff, but I think this should be good for me. Unless there's, say, queen g... No, queen g5, I just take, the queen defends g4. I think it works, right? Let's calculate it one more time. h4, knight takes, bishop takes, And, let's say this way actually now. Then after f takes, h5, bishop to f3. f3, there's queen g3 with a draw. Wow. So that's maybe not so good. Okay, actually, I can take this knight here, and you have to take with the pawn, because if you take with the queen, then there's knight d7 hitting the queen and hitting the rook. So we get a capture with the pawn, and now knight can go to d3, which I think is on a fairly decent square. The exchange doesn't bother me too much. I would get my queen into the game. Knight drops back to e7. Pawn f5 could be an idea, potentially. And I'm liking the look of something queen to f3, maybe queen to g3, trying to shift my rooks in, start an attack over here. I need to try and develop the queen off the back rank. So let's hit the pawn over here, put some pressure on it. If the bishop goes here, I always have something like queen to f4, trying to exchange off pieces and put my knight on a nice square. So I can defend this pawn with my queen. Knight can go here, then bishop here. Also knight f4, bishop e4, queen g3. Then I can try and get my rook to e3. Let's go for knight to f4. Trying to harass this pawn here. If I can get this bishop to come over, that's one less defender around the king as well. The knight can also always drop back to e2 if it really has to go on the defense, which ideally I don't want to, but if it happens, it happens. Okay, so bishop to e4. Let's go queen to g3. Okay, so king h8. I think that might be an engine move, or maybe they were just afraid of g5. But the rook going to g8 is looks like a very strong idea. Quite an interesting one there. I also want to bring in my rook potentially, although I might play something like king to h2 even. Could be an ambitious way, but is f5 ever really a threat? I think I can just guard up my pawn. So I'm going to go for the original rook to e3 idea so that I can overprotect this c3 pawn and shouldn't run into any trouble. So let's go for it. I doubt this was an engine move. They're just following up with the logical plan. And f5. Does f5 run into f3 though? It kind of looks like it, doesn't it? Because if f3... Oh, wait a minute. That move hung the queen. Knight g6. I don't know why. I wasn't looking for this. Crazy. Yeah, the queen... But the queen's not hanging anymore. No! The queen isn't hanging anymore. Oh, that's ridiculous. Okay, they got away with it. But now I have rook e7. No, I don't. I'm just confused. I'm very confused. But what I do have is wait, I don't even know. Yeah, this is sad. King h8 immediately ran into knight g6. Now we've entered the chaos. Because I think you can take this way and then take and maybe e5. No, but e5, rook g3. I don't even know, guys. Knight goes to g6. I think that's just a mistake. Because now I can capture the knight. Queen hits the queen. Queen has to take. And then I can take this bishop here. But, ooh. Okay, now let's exchange the queens. And take the bishop. I can't believe that I missed knight g6 there. Just a free queen. Just a free queen, guys. Crazy. Okay, so it takes in the center. Trying to attack these pawns. I could have played rook takes f7 as well, but I really want to eliminate this pawn here so that this center pawn can fall and my other rook is liberated. If I can get rid of these two, if this connect this defended passed pawn, then I should have no problems left. Right, rook h5 is a mate. Probably the suggested moves will be stuff like this, but that's a good game, and a checkmate. So we're now going to try and guess, very interesting, which moves of this game were from the engine and which were the human moves. I think c6 might have even been an engine move here, because it's quite rare. Or maybe d5. I was thinking bishop to b5. I think the early moves seemed a lot stronger. So I think two of them were used up. I think either the c6 d5 was probably just a plan, but bishop to b5 is an interesting one. I think this one might have been an engine move. Bishop to g4, I'm not sure. Very much not sure about that. Queen to d6. It's hard to say. The knight jumps in. Could be rook c8. Just a nice move, natural move. And I think maybe knight to e7 as well. Knight to e7 seems like quite an advanced repositioning of the knight to try and break with f5. And other than that, yeah, king h8, I was giving it praise. I was praising king h8. I was like, wow, what an idea, bringing the rook over. But actually, it just blunders a queen. Crazy. The queen had to like move out of the way with queen d7 or something first. And other than that, I don't think there was any more engine assistance. So quite possible that it was, in fact, c6, d5, bishop to b4 were all engine moves. And then I think that knight e7 and rook to c8 were also the engine moves. So I'm going to have a talk with my viewer and see what those moves actually were. We can get confirmation and try to we'll compare with them with my thoughts and what actually happened. Turns out that I did actually manage to guess those engine moves correctly. It was early ones like bishop to b4, but also a couple middle game ones with rook to c8 and knight to d7. So pretty happy with that. I feel like I got a pretty good understanding for which moves seemed more advanced and possible engine moves. You can kind of just tell they feel a little bit iffy, although of course it does help a lot knowing that an engine is being used during the game. I'm doubtful that I would have been suspicious otherwise. But nevertheless, let's move on to game number 3. Okay, so now my opponent is allowed 10 engine moves and also is allowed to check their moves to see whether or not they are blunders. This really starts to imitate what I think the smart, quoting quotes, cheater would be doing. We're checking their regular moves to see if they're bad, and if they're bad, then changing their mind. And then every now and then using the engine's top suggested choice. So this is what we're really trying to imitate here. There are 10 moves where my opponent can use the top suggested move, and every other move they're going to blunder check to try and make sure that they are not making any big mistakes. Pawn goes to d4. This is quite an aggressive gambit. I get the feeling that he might be trying to take me into a bit of a forest here, because the idea is that there's like knight takes on e4, and there's this like weird move pawn d5 or something. I can't quite remember what it is, but the variations get pretty tricky. So I think I'm just going to capture this one here. And if e5, we're going to transpose back into some mainline Alapin stuff. I actually think that d4 might have been one of the engine moves. He wanted to get a little bit tricky with it and take me into a forest for the 10 engine moves to get a big advantage. So pawn goes to e5. Let's put the knight in the center here. We see knight to f3. Gambiting this pawn over here, which is definitely an interesting decision. I think pawn d6 is one of the main approaches. Also knight to c6 here. Another main line, point being that if the knight captures, then my knight is already out and able to pressure this pawn in the center. So you'd have to capture with the pawn, and then we can play d6 and transpose back into some of the main lines after something like bishop c4. Bishop to c4 right away will, of course, be met with knight to b6, bishop to b3, and we can play something like pawn to d5. This is still pretty mainline stuff. Hopefully, my viewer is going to be burning a lot of their engine moves in this opening, rather than just blunder checking, unless they know this system well, which is also possible. So point of d5 is that we're going to try and block the bishop. If you take en passant, then I will take with my queen and bishop to e6, try and exchange off this strong bishop. You don't want to make the error of allowing any bishop takes on f7 tactics followed by knight to g5. Had this happen way too many times. Okay, so castles. We can meet castles with the move bishop to e6, trying to exchange off more pieces. Still looking at theory here. I guess there'll be a capture, something like this. And we get into some isolated queen pawn position, potentially if they take with the pawn. If they take with the queen, then I can always play my rook over here. And that should be pretty good. I can fianchetto like this as well. Okay. So a lot of moves make sense here. They obviously want some knight to c3 action, so I'm tempted by knight to d5 to try and exchange off this nice piece. And so if I can get something like queen to c4 in and e6, then I should be fully consolidated. But this is a lot of moves here, so let's calculate concretely. Knight to d5, knight c3, takes, queen to c4, stopping queen to a4. If the rook goes here, then I have b6. If d5, I always have rook to d8, and the pawn will drop off. So if something like maybe rook to e8, I have rook to d8, stopping the pawn going to d5. And I don't see a particularly good plan. If white just develops their bishop, I can play d6, and now there's no d5, my queen is on c4, and I can play bishop e7 castles and should be pretty solid. So I like the look of this move. If the queen goes to a5 with a4 with a check, I have queen d7, and the exchange of queens will be good for me because white has this isolated queen's pawn in their position, and that is not really what you like to see. Okay, knight to c3, that was an expected move. Let's take. Also important is that the knight defends against these squares, so there's no queen a5 check in between move. Actually, I'm not sure if I can play queen c4, because after queen c4, rook here, b6, there's rook to b5. Maybe there's queen to c6, and then things are getting dicey for white with the e6 with a discovery, but I don't really see why I wouldn't just play the move queen to c6. Unless maybe enticing the rook over to this square benefits me. Let's think about it for a second. Queen here, here. b6, rook b4, queen c6. d5 is a bad move because it makes the pawn weaker. No, I like the look of this actually. Queen c4, let's play it. And I want to play e6. Yeah, I quite like this position. Pressuring the pawns. I expect rook to b1. That seems like the strongest move, because this pawn is... No, I'm not threatening to take this at all. If you go rook b1 and I take this, there's like queen a4, rook goes to b7. So let's play b6 here. And I have realized that rook b4, there is queen takes here. But also even this looks a little bit dicey with like bishop to d2. Wow, d5. If d5 is a good move, this is definitely some work of a little bit of engine magic, because that move seems really wrong. I don't see why I can't just bring over my rook and capture that, to be honest with you guys. Rook here captures, check, queen d7. I am very confused. Very much confused. We'll have to see what my opponent has in store, because I don't think queen a4 is good enough. Because I get to block with a tempo, defend the pawn, offer the trade of queens. If there was time for rook here, then maybe it would be good enough. But I think the queens are coming off. I'm playing e6, bishop c4. I think black should be just fine here. We'll have to see. This should have been with... Oh, no. Oh, I made a big... Oh, no. Oh, dear. Queen a4 after queen a8. Oh, no. It was a combination of ideas. That's brutal. Guys, it looks like we've met our match. Yikes. I don't know if I should just allow this, but yeah, queen a8. There's no stopping the checkmate. That's so nasty. Okay, I'm just gonna play e6 then. Maybe there's something here. So if queen a4, b5, queen a7, bishop c4, queen a8, rook here. I guess queen b8's strong as well, though the pawn's dropping with check. The bishop's dropping. Oh my goodness, this is terrible. This is so bad, guys. This is so bad. Queen to b8 here, collect the bishop. Oh no. Queen a8. I don't understand what... Oh no, there's queen c6 anyway. Oh, this is so rough, guys. This is rough. Resigns. Wow. Good game to the cyborg opponent. What a final finishing combination. Let's take a look at that in the analysis, guys. I'm going to try and guess which moves were the engine move. I think it was most of them, to be honest with you. All of the tactics there, yeah, got completely crushed. Just switched out my camera position so you guys can see the game graph. Really not much to play for here. 97 accuracy, borderline perfect from our opponent. I tried to play it safe because I didn't want to get into the weeds of this gambit with knight takes and pawn to d5. I know it can get pretty complicated. But instead, we just ended up in a main line. And I got pretty much outplayed. I didn't realize, yeah, queen d7, e6, you have to castle as quick as possible. But instead, I tried to get way too fancy. I mean, I saw the moves from white, but d5 is truly a stunner. What a beautiful move here. Rook to b5, rook d4. That is savage. Absolutely savage. With the threat of queen a5. Just showing, taking advantage of the underdevelopment of black's king. So, yeah, really, really nice stuff here. Not much that I could do after the position crumbled. Bishop was going to drop off. Rook was going to come in, and I was ripe for the slaughter. Well, it does look like this level of cheating is sufficient for a 1600 rated player to overcome a 2400. And by the looks of how easy it was, the truth is that the tipping point is probably somewhere in between 5 engine moves and 10 engine moves plus this safety checking system for blunder checks. Maybe the safety checking and 5 engine moves would have been enough as well. We'll never really know, because I think I'm going to end this video here. The experiment has gone on long enough. And if you guys did find this interesting, then please do consider liking and subscribing. And as always, I'll see you guys in another video. Bye.